Ladies and gentlemen, thank you everyone, and actually, ladies and gentlemen, and all everyone between the binary. This is Get Informed with Wajeeh. Thank you for tuning in. That was not as smooth as NPR, but it's something. We have a very special guest for you today, an award-winning journalist, Deborah Amos, NPR international, former NPR international correspondent that has been seasoned in this field, covered the Middle East extensively, covered human rights violations in person, knew Jamal Khashoggi, and uh, previously a professor at Columbia University when I first met you. And now a professor of journalism at the university at Princeton University. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here. Nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. We connected about a decade ago, I think it was.
Yes, it was right when Jamal Khashoggi, right before or when Jamal Khashoggi got assassinated.
Yeah,
If
that was really fun.
oof, I want to start with here, one second. I have a document that I made for this. I apologize.
It's
I
okay.
thought I had it pulled out, but this is not it. Here you go. So, Deb, you've covered the Middle East for decades for NPR.
Correct.
Given the current,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I made 2 trips to Syria this year. I was there in January. I was there again in May.
I remember.
Um,
How was your trip to Syria?
it was terrific. I've been when I went in January, the officials who were on the transitional justice desk said we're going to have a trial in 2026, and I was surprised that they pulled it off because I knew that they weren't quite ready. But I think they did it because they were just getting such pushback because the economy is in terrible, terrible shape, and they
That's
haven't
right.
been able to fix it. And I think they could either give on the economy or give on accountability, and accountability was somehow easier for them. I think they realized how difficult these trials are going to be. That they wanted to tell a story with these trials. That's why they picked Atef Najib, because it's the beginning of the revolution. It
But
happens
for the
in Durham,
listeners, Altaf Najib was a member of the Assad regime. That's correct.
and the Assad family. He is the son of Assad's mother, so they are close cousins. And he was an intelligence guy. He was running Dara when a group of teenagers wrote graffiti on school walls that said, "Your next doctor." And this was right in the beginning of the Arab Spring. And Atef Najib is charged with um, ordering the shooting of protesters, ordering the arrest and the torture of those students, and saying to the parents who came to protest, "Your children are gone, make some more, and if you can't, I will send my men to your homes." It was such an incendiary thing to say in a conservative Muslim part of Syria. These people are on the border. And so populations on borders of states that value the security are usually very loyal to the regime. Nobody expected the revolution to start in Dara, maybe in Homs, but certainly not in Dara. So it was an event that was the spark for a revolution that turns into a civil war that goes on for 14 years. So when the regime decided who they were going to try first, it was storytelling as much as it was justice. They wanted to start in the beginning to make the point that this was a peaceful revolution, and it became a violent one because the regime fired on protesters, which they did. And we'll see if those charges hold up. Already, they're having a little bit of trouble with the storyline. Everybody in Syria knows that story, the one I just told, but it may be harder to prove it than it is to tell it. Now, for me, I came back in May. I was there for the trial, and um, I met the graffiti boys. They were there, and they're
You
now.
did.
I did. That's exactly how excited I was about the graffiti boys. I covered this story in 2011 from Beirut, and to meet them,
Oh my God.
and one of them, who I love his name is Muawiyah Sanafi. And, Muawiyah is the first guy who ruled Syria. So, his parents, that was no joke of a name. Anyway, the first thing I said to him is, did they really pull your fingernails out? And he said, no, they didn't. They did terrible things to us, but they didn't do that. So that part
Okay.
of the story is going to go away. And what he told me, which was an interesting thing, because it raises questions about what they're going to do about charging Atef Najib. It was Air Force intelligence that came down to arrest them. They were brought to Damascus to be tortured there. So, because Syria doesn't have in their domestic law, which is what they're using until they can get a parliament set up and have a wider law about these trials, doesn't have the crime of chain of command.
You
And
think,
so,
you
go ahead.
think, as this is a storytelling for the, have, Ahmed al this seems more like also trying to rally public opinion in support of the new government.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they have been so proactive on social media, on Facebook with, so 2 days before the trial of Najib, they arrest this guy. And he is responsible for this mass grave
Yeah.
in Hama. And they've been hunting him for a year. He's hiding out in his family home. But when it gets hot for him, he runs up into this mountainous area and he hides there. So it takes them a year to figure this out. They arrest him 2 days before Atef Najib's trial. And why it's important and why he is going to be prioritized, that trial is going to be prioritized, is because there is a video that was released by The Guardian in 2021. And what you see is he is urging people in blindfolds to run up to the lip of this mass grave and he shoots them. And one of his compatriots takes a video of it. So you see it and you can identify the victims. The problem with mass graves is you don't know who's in them. And it's going to take a long time to figure it out. So you don't have any victims. You can't have trials without victims, named victims. That's why Najib works, because you have the graffiti boys. You have people who can come to court and say, he did this to me. That's what
Mhm.
justice is all about. And so for the first time now, you don't need your DNA kits, which Syria didn't have any because it used to be on the sanctions list. Yes. And it was because of the chemicals in the kits. They were said to be dual use. So there's no DNA kits in all of Syria. 66 mass graves and no DNA kits. They need the international community. There's a UN agency that does it. There is a intergovernmental agency in The Hague that does it. They need the help of the international community to identify the bodies. But if in this case, they won't have to wait for the DNA. You can see the faces of the people that they made run up to the lip of the mass grave, and they shot them.
And for the viewers and listeners, you're talking about uh, the mass graves. This is not to mention the bodies that have been buried under all of the rubbles of the buildings that have been taken down by the Syrian regime and the Russian government, dropping these bombs. And there has reports, I remember since the war started, that so many bodies are buried under these rubbles, and there's just no resources to remove
No.
that rubble and going through all of that. So, uh,
Although just
see,
yesterday it was announced that there's Gulf states that are going to give the Syrians $7 billion to start reconstruction. That's been their problem. They don't have any money.
no
They
money.
really don't. And, the sanctions were lifted, but there's still this one big sanction that hasn't been lifted, and that's the 1979 congressional act that called out 4 states to be state sponsors of terrorism. It was the Iranians, it was the Cubans, it was the North Koreans, and it was the Syrians, and that one hasn't been lifted yet. And so it is sort of getting in the way of, lots of contracts, lots of Gulf countries, the Turks, everybody wants to come in and, make some money reconstructing Syria. But the banking system isn't set up yet. They're just getting credit cards. Every time I go, you've got to take a wad of cash.
Yes.
And you've got to hope that what you brought lasts for your whole trip, because it's really hard to get some more. You can have it driven in from Lebanon, but then you have to have a system to it's really, it's really difficult to go there because of this cash problem. And so if it's hard for a journalist, it's hard for business people who want to set up shop there.
Yeah.
So that just happened. But yes, the trials are a domestic issue. Most Syrians are demanding justice, and if you won't do it, we will. There's problems with these revenge killings that are going on in homes, and if they don't get these trials underway, they're going to have more of that.
Um, the y- were were you around when the conflict between the Druze and local army militias that are related to Shara were clashing?
Yes, I've been covering Syria ever since. I watched the one on the coast too. Yeah, those were terrible things.
What do you think about that? The Shara has been playing a different game. He was a member of Al Qaeda and then member of ISIS and was a leader in ISIS. Some report says he was responsible for burning the Jordanian Air Force pilot, but I don't have necessarily direct concrete proof
I
of
don't
that.
think for that. And his associations with ISIS are pretty murky. I'm not even sure he was a member. Al Qaeda, absolutely, absolutely. And somewhere around 2016, 2017 is when he not only gets out, but calls on 2 academics to come to Idlib to write a book to document that he is going to turn to the West. That's how early it is. And it's a
Wow.
very interesting, yes, it's a very interesting book to read because
What's the
the
name of the
theme
book?
it's called, and hang on, I will get you the precise.
Take your time. I'm not hearing you. Could you mute and unmute yourself? I'm
You have a
having hard.
Can you hear me?
No, I can. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Transformed by the People, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's Road to Power in Syria. And I'll give you an example of what the book talks about. So Ahmed al-Shara gets to Idlib. He's got 8,000 guys. Idlib
That's
has
right.
3 million people, and it was, as it was the dumping ground. So every time the regime took back a village, they put everybody who was still alive on a bus and they dumped them in Idlib. So it was probably the most diverse province in the country, and everybody had terrible experiences. So Shara arrives, and he's got 8,000 guys, and a lot of them are serious jihadis. They are. Chechens certainly are. Um, Idlib's got 1,000 mosques, and about a third of them are Sufis. I mean, they're
Hmm.
close to the Turkish border. It's just that kind of place. It's conservative, but there's a lot of Sufis in Idlib. Now, jihadis don't like Sufis. They kind of don't even think
No,
that they're Muslim. And they tend to
that's
do
right.
things like, you know, kill them and burn down their houses of worship. But Al-Shara can do the math. He's got 8,000 guys. There's 3 million people. There's 1,000 mosques. That ain't going to work. So what he doesn't said is he takes his most uh, radical of his guys and he puts them all on a council to think about Islamic law. So they spend all day going, what? It says right here that you can't. And that keeps him busy. And so he sort of strips away the tension. This guy opens churches in Idlib. This guy builds a mall in Idlib. This guy does things that, when you make the equation jihadi and shopping center, it doesn't quite compute. And
Hmm.
and by 2016, he's thinking in a very different way on where he wants to go. I think he's already aiming at Damascus soon after he arrives, and he begins preparing his people for what's going to happen next. It's where he learns to govern because he
Wow.
has to govern 3 million people there. Now, the question about him is, does this translate across an entire country? And there's a lot of people that say, well, no, it doesn't. It's, he's again learning on the job to expand our horizons. You can see what he's doing. Everybody around him is a loyalist from his days in Idlib. And you can't run a government like that, not for a whole state. You can't.
Now, interestingly, he's still facing issues with ISIS. There's still apparently ISIS militias out there that are fighting back against the Syrian regime.
They're not
They're
just
not
in
big.
Syria. They're not just in Syria. I mean, Jordan is having a problem with them. They're burning crops in Jordan.
Well,
So yes, there's been a resurgence of them, and Syria is feeling it too.
but since Sharia gotten in power and aligned himself with the Al Saud family, things started taking a turn for the Syrian government and the Syrian people, hasn't it?
You mean in terms of support? I mean,
Yes.
it was MBS um, who talked Trump into embracing him, and boy, did he embrace him. He said he was handsome. He said he was powerful. I mean, it was like, what is that? And I don't know if you saw El Shaddai's appearance at the White House where he squirted him with perfume. And there's a moment where
Yeah.
you see his face go, "Ah," and then he realizes, all right, I got to put up with this. And he comes around the other side and squirts him some more. And there's just been a very hilarious exchange between the two of them where he sent him more perfume to Damascus.
Yes, he did, and he took a picture of that perfume. I remember that post.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting to see Trump. Well, first of all, Trump, anytime he sees a good-looking guy, he has to say this person is a good-looking guy. I don't know.
Out of central
Uh,
casting is the other thing he says. If he doesn't say you're handsome, he says you're out of central casting.
well, do you see that Shara would be able to unite Syria, especially with the Druze and the Kurds, and you got now Lebanon happening? Trump wants him to take action in Lebanon, and he told Trump, "No, I'm not taking action in Lebanon." Like,
Exactly. Are you insane?
so,
No.
like, so
I
we
mean,
it seems like he's genuinely had some changes. I'm not like endorsing him, but like from
no, I
hearing
know,
from
but it's
you,
interesting to watch him. I find it very interesting to watch him. Because we haven't seen anybody, when he was on his way to do a speech at the UN, I convinced Slate to let me write a piece because I said, "Okay, when was the last time you saw a guy who used to be with Al Qaeda making a speech at the UN?" And we all go, never, right? Never.
uh,
So he's just an interesting historical figure. Whether he can unite Syria, what has he got, like 50 years? He doesn't have that much time to do it, but it's a huge job because for 50 years before he gets there, the Assad's whole reason for being is to divide the country and to make everybody loyal to their town and their sect and not to the country. So, it's a bunch of people who don't think of themselves as Syrians. They think of themselves as Sunnis or Shia or Alawite or Druze or, Kurds. And to have a national identity is really it's going to take a while. And especially because, everything's a crisis. Does he have the money to pay his own military? And the answer to that is, not really. Does he have the money to pay the bureaucracy? Uh, can he make payroll?
Hmm.
All of these things really matter in bringing a state together. So his challenges are overwhelming, just overwhelming. No matter what you think of him as, a former jihadi who, decided that power was a bigger deal than jihadism. That's interesting in it of itself. But, his father wrote a book about democracy, and he is the only really conservative religious guy in his family. They lived in downtown Damascus. It was an upper middle class neighborhood. It's where Bashar lived. He went to a exclusive high school. His best friend was an Alawite. So his background is just weird. Um,
A lot of people believe that extremists have to come from conservative backgrounds, but some of the
yeah,
biggest important Islamic extremists that we have came from very rich, privileged background. Osama bin
and
Laden grew up in one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia, and he was the only
well,
religious member.
well, here's the thing about him. I mean, he was the son of a
One,
Syrian mother.
that's right.
Um, and did he really grow up in that milieu? Not really, because she wasn't the favorite wife. Well, I don't know. She was the favorite wife. But he had an odd relationship in that family because of who his mother was.
He was the only son from that wife, and
I
he
believe it.
definitely felt like an outsider. I had a chance to run through his some of his half brothers in Medina when I
Wow.
was yeah, and my mom had chance to meet some of his sisters and some of his family members. So we've had our own run-ins, and my mom is Syrian, by the way.
Oh,
So
wow.
in case you didn't know that, so I do have a little bit of blood in Syria. In fact, my mom, my grandpa was a judge during Hafid al-Assad time, the father of Bashar al-Assad, for the listeners who don't know that. And he was ordered to sentence several people to death who were innocent. And he was a religious man and couldn't take that on his conscience. So he took his mother, his wife, and his kids and went to Saudi Arabia and started over. Well, Hafid al-Assad didn't like that, so he um, killed four of his brothers in retaliation to that. So we kind of have a direct history with Bashar al-Assad family in terms of my family. When the revolution first started, I graduated from high school, so I directly kind of was involved within fundraising money with Doctors Without Borders stuff. So I've kind
Oh,
of been
been Saudi.
yes. So I have had some ideas of what's happening in there. Syria is not the only vulnerability that is in the Middle East at the moment. There's multi, uh, multi vulnerabilities in the region.
Wait,
One of them is
this,
Syria.
yeah, many, 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 many. I mean, I'm thinking about the Iran negotiations, which
That's
begin
right.
again, I think, on the 17th. Trump, he always is trying to have a dominance performance. And yesterday he said, "Oh, we're going to let them have their funeral and take a break." Isn't that nice? And I think, why is that necessary? Why is that necessary? Because it was a snide comment, and he meant it to be a snide comment. But, I was thinking about this morning, sort of reading in on where everything is, and there's two branches to what these negotiations are. There's kind of the Trump-Vance
Hmm.
contingent, and they're kind of, they appear to be kind of anti-Israel. They say bad things about Netanyahu, and we have to restrain him, and he's a pain, and he's getting in the way, and he's doing all these terrible. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But Rubio is the guy who is doing the Lebanese negotiations, which is the thing
Mhm.
that could sink the Iran one. And the Lebanese one are much more pro-Israel. I mean, this agreement is astonishing. It
You
says
you got into a very important topic. Let me put this into perspective for the listeners. So Lebanon is divided into Shia, Sunni, Christians. That's how it was designed after the French left.
18 sects. It's not just those three. There's 18 sects in Lebanon.
Well, no, the ones who are running the government, the president, the prime minister, and
Yes, those are the main ones. Yes.
yeah. So those three positions, the Christians are the closest ones to the Israelis.
Historically,
The
yes.
Israelis have a problem with the Shia. They don't have a problem with the Christians. Does it make sense for us to sit down and negotiate with the Christians over the Shia? Why are we talking to the president group rather than the Speaker of the House or Speaker of the Parliament?
So, A, because probably the Speaker of the House doesn't really want to talk to the Americans about this. B, because he's the president of Lebanon. He happens to be a Christian by the Constitution. He has to be a Christian. And here's the problem with all of this. So, the deal that Rubio got them all to make, is Israel doesn't have to withdraw until Hezbollah is disarmed. Now, who's going to do that? It's certainly not going to be the Lebanese army. They're not strong enough. There's another way you could do it. You could bring all of the arms carriers for Hezbollah into the military, but it would overbalance the Lebanese military as a majority Shia national military. Nobody's going to say yes to that. Nobody.
Hmm.
Already, this agreement has brought thousands of people to the street. There's 10 political parties who are against it because they understand that it means that Israel is not going to get out of the South. That's what the agreement calls for, because it makes it conditional on Hezbollah being disarmed, which nobody can do. And here's
A
another clause.
$1 billion annual budget.
And here's the
About.
other thing that's in it that people are upset about. It requires that the Lebanese does not take Israel to any international forum. For example, if you want to say, this is a war crime, I want to take you to The Hague, you can't. You can't.
That's right. That's Section 13.
Precisely.
Lebanon gives a way to asking the International Criminal Court to investigate any human rights violations or war crimes done by the Israelis.
They can't.
If this MOU is violated, can they still do that?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer. But here's the thing: if it's violated, then the Iranians can say, "Okay, we're closing the strait again." But these two things are tied together. They are. My favorite quote of this week is, and I wrote it down because I wanted to say it to you. And this is by Rashida Tlaib, who was trying to
Oh, I
get.
know. I know Rashida Tlaib. Yeah.
Yeah, and she writes what she wants is something in Congress that will stop this from happening, and she can't get the vote. So what she says is, and she's talking to the Lebanese government, learn the lessons of the countries before you, the lessons of Lebanon's own history. A ceasefire means you cease, they fire. Do not abandon your land and your people and become their subcontractors for Israeli occupation.
Ouch.
Ouch, you bet, ouch. And so, I think that people are not paying too much attention to this Lebanon started part of the deal, but it matters because it's in the MOU for the Iran deal with the Trump administration. It matters. If it falls apart, so does the Iranian one.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how Israel is intending to keep the ceasefire while they stay in Lebanon and dismantle Hezbollah. Like, I genuinely am trying to wrap my hand around this oxymoron.
They
Like,
they if they could dismantle Hezbollah, they would have done it, but they can't. And that has been true since all of this started, because when they first started doing it, Hezbollah was on its back foot. The Iranians, were in trouble, and they couldn't really do much to help them. Al-Shara was in Syria, so they lost their highway, how they got the arms to Hezbollah. And now it's a different situation. Iran has withstood Israel and the United States. They are stronger than they've been. They're looking out for their strongest proxy. I mean, there's the historical relationship between Iran and Lebanon. During the Shah's time, there were tons of clerics, Iranian clerics, who stayed in Lebanon, and that's where they hid out. Um, and so this is different than Hamas. It's different than the Houthis. They are historically linked with each other,
That's right.
and that's why they're looking out for them. And these guys are Shia. Uh, y- you know, Hamas is not. Hamas, those are Sunnis.
Sunday.
So these are their brethren. And even in Syria, it was always, hold your nose and accept that Alawites are kind of like Shia, but they're not really.
My mom always called them Shia.
Yes, but they're not. I mean,
I know, but you're right. I'm adding to your point.
yes, yes, exactly, exactly. I mean, there are some Shia in Syria, but not very many. It's Alawites. I mean, these guys drink, so they can't really be Shia. But
This
anyway,
is the highway you were talking about.
yeah,
Everyone that was asking me. Iraq, from Iran to Iraq, from Iraq to Syria, from Syria to Lebanon, from Lebanon to
yeah.
Palestine, and the whole spiel.
Now, it's a little harder now, but put that map up again because they used to be able to get weapons into Gaza. And that must have been a harder thing, but they did it. So, you don't actually need a highway. It's just harder and you get less of them in. So I'm sure that they've figured this out by now, how to get weaponry because we can see that somebody has, or Hezbollah buried everything and just dug it all up because it's been a surprise, certainly to the Israelis, that they are as potent an opponent as they are at this time.
Well, I guess you could say they've been stacking weapon for 40 years.
Hey, that's when I came into this story. Hezbollah wasn't there yet, but man, 82 started the whole thing.
uh, so yeah, it's not surprising that they have, you know, stockpiles of weapons almost anywhere and everywhere. Um, we were talking about Lebanon. We talked about the highway. I was wondering if we talked about the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. That's what I wanted to talk about. The ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel is the horn that is not letting this peace deal between the United States and Iran to happen. And the United States is not wanting to include that because Israel doesn't want it to be included within the peace deal of Iran. But Iran's making it regardless of whether they want it or not as part of the MOU.
And can I put in
So I think,
full detail of all of
yes,
this?
please.
And that is,
You can always say
JD
something. Yeah.
Vance did something very strange in a podcast last week, and he didn't say it explicitly, but he seemed to say it implicitly, which what he said was something like, well, we did this so that we can normalize oil prices again for the next 60 days. But, once we do that, and we're getting now closer to the midterms, right? So gas prices go down and we aren't on the precipice of a global recession because you know the traffic coming through the straits is rising, and the podcaster says to him something like, so the idea is that this MOI is for American interests, and then we'll see in 60 days, and he says yes, and
I
so
called it a gas break.
Unbelievable. And I'm thinking, why do you need, why are you saying the quiet part out loud? They already are thinking that that's what you're up to. Now you've said it out loud. So why do they trust you? And why won't they be more hardcore on, I'm sorry, we said Lebanon was part of the deal.
Hmm. Uh, and this is exactly why I was going to ask you, how close are we to a kinetic attack?
To a what?
Another, like, how close are we from this MOU or MII from breaking apart, from the war
I don't think
coming back
we know.
together?
You know, I don't think we know. And here's the thing. I wonder if the United States doesn't dangle lifting sanctions on the money, if that makes a difference to the Iranians.
Could you elaborate?
So they have a big problem with their economy, a big problem.
That's right.
Um,
And big water problem as well.
and a big water problem. And so, you can see where the lifting of sanctions to get flooded with money is. It's way up high. That's what the Iranians want, because they desperately need it. That will keep civil strife at a manageable level. I mean, it's been interesting in the last couple of weeks is women without scarves have been showing up in demonstrations on state TV. Yes, they have. And I've never seen that before, and nobody said anything about it, but it's there. And Trita Parsi's been writing about it. That's how I know about it, and he showed some examples of it. So, a couple of things that you perhaps could think is happening. One is those secular Iranians who were so angry with the regime are now so angry with Israel and the United States that they've become patriotic Iranians, as, Americans might feel in the same situation. Two, the regime is trying to be more inclusive than it was before, because
Mhm.
that wasn't getting them anywhere. As a matter of fact, it got them in the pit they're in right now. So I just put that as something to think about. But I also wonder if the United States doesn't lift the sanctions, that changes the dynamics. I mean, let's see what happens when I think they care. I think the Iranians care about that as much as anything. Um, Whether they have to buy soybeans from the United States or not is another question, because apparently that's what Trump says, that they gotta buy their stuff. And you can see that the Iranians are thinking about it, because they say things like, "We will buy what the Iranian people need." They don't say from where. Um, but that's usually what we do with foreign aid, is make the country that gets the foreign aid buy what they're gonna buy with that money from. Yes. It's
From us, the
Yeah,
United
from
States.
us. And if anybody understands a business deal, it is the current president. So he's been saying it out loud now quite a bit.
I have heard that like, this is interesting because when the United States and Israel did their kinetic attacks on Ali Khamenei and killed him and his wife, there was, a mixed feeling, mixed type of people on the streets. There's some people that were celebrating his killing, and many people were out there crying and upset about his killing. Now, we we saw Iran take down these dissent real quickly and eliminate a lot of people that have shown any support against Khomeini. The reality is that after that, I've heard of some of those supporters that have nothing to do with uh, the Raza Pahlavi group that have turned against the West, where they're like, you are killing my family members
Yeah, no.
that have nothing to do with the regime. The US government back in 2009 came up with an equation for every single innocent life we killed using drones in Afghanistan. We were generating 1.5 terrorists. Of course, that equation would be different somewhere else, but you're not talking about terrorist organization in Iran. You're talking about a country where people are easily could be given a weapon and join the military, and you have like people can join up and become against the U.S. Has the U.S. changed the Iranian perspective on whether they will be saving the Iranian people, or whether it's just America's trying to get their own like personal interest in
Who knows? I
this?
mean, let's wait for a poll. But let me tell you an anecdotal story. So the last time I was in Tehran was in 2014, and in a strange event, my government provided translator was not pro government. There's a moment when we're driving around Tehran, and his daughter gets arrested for being with a man she's not married to in a park. And he can't get through the traffic to get me back to my hotel. So he says to me, I have to bring you to the police station with me to sort this out. His wife's on the phone. I can hear her. She's screaming. She's out of her mind. Like, go get our daughter. We get to the police station, and I make a terrible mistake. I have a tape recorder in my hand, and I turn it on, and they see the red light, and they arrest me. So I spend the next 6 hours in jail on the women's side with his daughter and two other women, one of them and us, and all arrested for the same thing, for being in the park with a man that wasn't their husband's. And one of them speaks English, so I know what's going on through the whole thing. Anyway, it turned out terrific. They wanted to buy me gifts when I left. I mean, they were adorable. It was so nice. And I thought, Jesus, if an Iranian journalist had done this in Washington, they probably would have shot him. So, and I wrote about it. I wrote about it too. That you can find it's online, and the headline is something like, it starts with yells, it ends with a hug. I got a hug from my jailer before I left. Anyway,
Wait, why? What changed their perspective
because we
from?
sorted it. So I had a journalist visa. I was legal.
Okay,
And I had a tape recorder, and what they wanted me to do, what we finally negotiated was I would erase the two things that I recorded at the police station. But how would they know, right? And so, how it got determined, where it began, was there was an interview in Farsi right before it starts, and I'm clearly at the downtown market, and I hear the guy speaking Farsi, and he's being translated by my translator. And then these two other things on the recorder obviously are the police station. And I show them that I erase it, and they can hear it, that it's not there anymore. And then that took 6 hours to negotiate. Um,
oh my God.
and so I'm kind of nice through it all. I don't yell at anybody. I'm not a jerky American. I just like, oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I did all, I was, and they decided that I was okay. I was harmless, to tell you the truth. And so that's why the hugs were there. And she was wonderful because I could see under her chador, she had on a leather bustier. She did.
Oh
I'm
my
not kidding
God.
you. And she had blonde, dyed hair with, roots about this long
Yeah,
when her headscarf was off. So I thought, all right, girlfriend.
that's
so
right.
so fast forward to now, and I haven't heard from him since 2014. And he sends me a picture because he wants me to know that the police station where I was arrested has now been bombed. And he sent me the picture out of nowhere. He appears again, and he shows me a picture of his daughter, who's married the guy she was arrested for, and now has two kids. So we start talking, and this is right in the beginning, like day 1 or 2, 3, I forget which one. And he's as happy as a clam. He thinks, oh, finally, the Americans, the good guys, they've arrived. They're going to save us from this horrible. And this goes on for a while. And I can see he's kind of changing his position. And I say, sorry about your Ayatollah. Our Ayatollah is still bombing you. And he doesn't think that's funny. He likes our Ayatollah, and he tells me so. He thinks Trump is great. Finally, there is a moment where he switches, and he realizes, it was all, it's the same old crap. And the Americans are not the good guys. And the Iranians beat them at their own game. And he's in the soup again because he doesn't like them. So,
Were
and
you there when the U.S. killed the supreme leader, or were
was
you
I
there
there?
after?
No, 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 no. I was here. I was
Oh,
watching just like you. I was watching online.
oh,
And,
okay.
and that was day one. So, and he was happy about that. He doesn't like those people. So he was happy, but he turned, and he saw that, his side lost.
Wow.
and so did the Americans. So anecdotally, I saw it.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely confirms something that I've been hearing, that the people who were looking in Iran to the state, hoping that they will be dismantling the regime, because Trump came out and said, "Be ready as soon as we kill the Mushtaba, get out on the street and take control of your country."
Yeah.
Apparently, Trump didn't understand the mosaic Iranian governmental strategy.
Also, he didn't read every single, war enactment for 20 years that said, if you attack Iran, they'll close the strait. All the war games said that, all of them.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we know who was in the situation room. It was uh, Pete, Princess Patricia Hexa, and Princess Rubio. Both were in the room, and they were both asking for crazy stuff like this war to happen. It's crazy. Uh, Now, Iran, a lot of every time we hear about Iran, we hear about their proxies. Can we determine if these, did we come to a determination that these are actually proxies, or are these actual followers of the supreme leader and they feel obligated to that nation because they are following the supreme leader? Do you
I
know?
don't know. I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know about the Houthis.
I
I
don't
don't
know if
know
you had a
about
conversation
Hamas.
with them.
But, I mean, as I said, Lebanon has a long history with the Iranians. It was a place of exile for Islamists during the Shah's time. There were, Iranian mullahs who were among the Shia population in southern Lebanon. So they've had a connection for years. So let me tell you something. There's a way that Lebanese Shia get to the Holy Lands. I'm gonna show it to you
Okay.
because so I asked for somebody to bring this for me. So
Yes, that's Ali.
yep, and this is a cigarette case, and that's a lighter.
What? Is that a Zippo lighter?
Yeah. So where I got this, and I begged a friend to get it for me. It was in the gift shop in a Turkish airport, which is where you make the connection to get from Beirut to southern Turkey to Qom when you're going on your pilgrimage. And so that gets sold to Lebanese I love this.
Someone says it looks like Jesus.
I think it does. I think it does look like
He does look like Jesus, doesn't he?
it's one of my prized possessions.
That's really funny. That's
Because it
actually
tells
pretty.
you so much that you would sell this at, in an airport gift shop. I mean, where else would you sell this in an airport gift shop than you had all these pilgrims?
That's
That was the
right.
transit airport.
Well, the question I wanted to get to, well, by asking you the first question is, how much control does Iran actually have or can exert over these Houthi, Hezbollah, or Hamas, even though Hamas is not? There's a lot of talk that Iran controls these people and these people work on behalf of Iran. According to your reporting, how much of that is true? How much is that is a myth?
I don't think anybody knows really how exactly the turnkey goes. Do the Houthis do it because they feel obliged? Because you can't ever predict when the Houthis will jump in. Every once in a while, they'll do it. They don't do it all the time. They also have their own priorities. Will the Saudis thump them for it? Not right now because everybody's kind of, waiting. Um, and certainly Hezbollah came in, after October 6th, when, Hamas uh, crossed the border into Israel and, essentially committed a massacre and hostages, and the war begins, and everybody in the region is like, wait a minute, this is a little overkill, isn't it, for what just happened? and Hamas stepped in. And that was by order of the Iranians? Probably not. They make their own calculations and they decide. Now, here's what's interesting about this new MOI with the Lebanese. Can Hezbollah, if the MOU fails between the United States and Iran and the war starts again, I think it's conceivable to say that Hezbollah has less of a deterrence because the Israelis are now occupying southern Lebanon.
Yeah, that makes sense because but they're in direct action. Someone was complaining to me like, "Oh, how do you want the ceasefire to happen when Hezbollah is attacking Israel?" I'm like, "You realize they're at a war. Like Israel has invaded Lebanon,
Yeah,
and so like it's not, and Israel is up to 20, 30 kilometers right now in
right, I
inside
thought it was
Lebanon.
10, but, it's possible. I thought it was 10.
No, I thought maybe it's 30 miles then
It's also
because
possible that they can menace up to 30, and they're
well,
actually standing in 10.
here I'll just pull up the map because the map is actually quite interesting if you look at it the way they did it. Um, the way the Israelis have expanded in Lebanon is actually quite interesting because they wanted to reach a stronghold. So the Israelis are basically like this
Uh,
from here. Here,
what town are they up
they
to?
have
Tyre?
they have Al Qulaila, Haris, and then they go all the way to almost southern Beirut. They go from here, and it's almost like a J shape,
Yeah.
and then it goes through the borders up there because it's gonna reach a stronghold that Hezbollah has up here.
Oh, and by the way, the Israelis have announced they are not getting out of, Syria either.
Really? So
Yeah,
Julan, they're not gonna get out of the Julan. They're not getting out of the.
no.
So how is this going to? You see, I grew up. I never told you this, but I grew up in a household where my parents wanted me to become a mujahid.
Oh my.
Uh, Yeah, so I grew up in a very extremist household with very religious extremism. Well, and now I'm like, I speak a lot about how to defeat religious extremism. But this is playing into all of the conspiracy theories that these extremist Muslims have. Israel is there to expand to have the greater Israel. And now there are people in Israel publicly saying this out loud. Ben Gavir is openly calling about expanding Israel, openly calling for the destruction of settlements, a destruction of Palestinian houses so they could build settlements. This is what's stopping them from building settlements inside Lebanon, and we're stopping them from building settlements inside of Julan next.
Same people in Israel are stopping them from doing that. I mean, let's see, we've got an election coming in Israel. And Netanyahu is not, we don't know whether he wins it or not. I'm not saying that the people who are running against him are so different politically than he is, but enough different that I think we have to wait and see what happens.
Well,
For
my
the,
only fear is that the Israeli would make vote for someone that's even more extreme.
I don't know. We will see. I mean, look, here's the thing. I, because I teach journalism, I've been, and especially this summer, I've been reading a lot about so what you can call the autocrat's playbook. And that means that Putin developed it, Orban perfected it, although it didn't help him in the end. It's being done in Serbia, in some ways in Turkey. Um, And the second thing that I'm looking at, and there's a very interesting new book called The New Censorship. It's written by an Israeli journalist, but she's very good on Trump uh, and Orban and Putin. And what she says is that during the Gaza war, the channels in Israel, the Israelis didn't see the war. They didn't. And many of them don't believe there was a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Not that it was Hamas's fault, not that it was on and off, but there wasn't one because they never saw it. It wasn't on Israeli television. That the communications minister bullied, cajoled, whatever he had to do, and so did Netanyahu. And so they saw something different than you saw, and I saw, and Egypt saw, and Jordan saw, and Rhode Island saw. They did. And so many of them scratch their heads and think, well, they're all saying it, so they must be anti Semites because we didn't see it. And they didn't see it. It wasn't there.
Wow.
They
That
weren't watching TikTok, although TikTok has now been taken over by, the Ellis family in some ways. And so TikTok will not be showing Gaza like it did for 2 years. It's not going to happen again that way. And so I don't know if the Israelis will do their own research, will figure it out, will come to understand that what happened there, just because they didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. I don't
That's
know.
right. That's right. I mean, I said it on my podcast. The world can protest as much as they want. People can go in Europe. New generations can put pressure on their elected representatives. But the actual difference, the actual change, is in the hand of the Israeli voter. So I call on Israeli voters to go out and make a difference. Um, like from my own perspective, I'm a person that have always advocated for living together and living, in peace. And I think uh, Israelis want Arabs to push the Abrahamic Accord even in dialogue. And now it become very hard for people like myself to come out and say, we want to push a peace treaty with the Israelis. As long as the Israelis are committing these heinous crimes against humanity, human rights activists can't come out and say, let's do this. Like, I just genuinely can't justify calling for, and I have come out on Israel 24. I've been invited on there 14 times. I've been invited to go to Israel. I haven't been. But like, I'm a person that believes in peace, but this is not the way to peace. I think Israelis can do something about that, and I hope they can do something about that. But this Israel, US, Iran, Lebanon war has affected the Gulf states
Oh, yeah.
tremendously and has affected the relationship between these Gulf states, Arab Gulf states, and the United States. How did this affect this relationship? Is the GCC actively preparing for a post-American Middle East, or is it just the uh, masterclass and helping their and hedging their bet?
That is what they do. They hedge their bets.
That's right.
One thing we know for certain is they are now, born again supporters of Ukraine. Um, and that was interesting how that happened. The Saudis made that agreement with Zelensky about 2 days after Trump said at his golf course that Mohammed bin Salman could kiss his ass. He said that.
Hmm. In front of
Uh,
a room of Saudi investors.
yes, he did. And so 2 days, I think 1 or 2 days later, he signs the agreement with Zelensky. And then Rubio comes because Rubio wants to do tut, 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 right? Exactly. And MBS tells him to go take a hike. We're doing this, dude. We are
Mm-hmm.
doing this. And so that was an interesting. And the second interesting thing was when they shut off airspace for the Americans. They don't do that. And they usually hedge their bets. And this time it's like, not this time. We're not. Because they didn't want to widen the war and they thought that Trump was being reckless and they wanted to
When,
stop. And they did stop him. He had to not do that.
well, when they did that, Trump came around. I mean, they stopped the U.S. from making that particular attack, right? But Trump came around and started threatening Saudi Arabia. If you
And
don't open the airspace, we will stop all of our shipments, weapon shipments to Saudi Arabia. Are you? How?
you know, it's his dominance performance. You have to decide whether you believe it or not. And my guess is they didn't because he can't afford to lose Saudi Arabia. He cannot. And certainly his son-in-law cannot. They
Uh,
have these interlocking money deals between them. So that was just a moment of pure rage. Does he want the Saudis to turn to China as their best friend? I don't think so. Because Trump still believes in the supremacy of oil. And there's a whole bunch of people, certainly in Europe, that don't. But
well,
Trump
it's
does.
interesting that you say that. The crown prince have been invited to the G7 in the last 3 to 4 years, and he skipped every single one of them. Yet he attended the BRICS uh, summit.
Yeah.
This, in my views, shows that there is an actual shift. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do. Because look, the first time that the Saudis had to face it is when Trump didn't do anything when the Iranians hit the oil fields. Like, what is the point of this?
Why have we been paying trillions of dollars and investing in your economy and investing in every single weapon you've been creating and begging for the F-35 and asking you to have a U.S. bases in our country, and then you're only protecting you didn't even do a good job protecting your own bases in our country,
Yeah.
nevertheless protecting us.
But, I don't know, the Saudis are so not transparent, so secretive about where they're going,
Two-faced. They're two-faced.
that it's really hard to make that prediction and what they're gonna do. There's tons of analytical articles that are saying that's what's gonna happen, "Show me the money." I don't know. Uh, it's not over yet. Um, so let's see. Let's see. I
Uh,
mean, look,
the water's still murky.
they also had to do some balancing, so they made friends with the Iranians again.
That's right.
I know they did. And they all kind of decided, all right, we're going to talk to each other. Now, what happens when the war is over? I assume that at some moment the war will be over. And the Saudis and the Qataris, I don't know if the UAE will ever do it, I doubt it, start having business relationships in Iran. That's not out of the question. It changes the whole way the Gulf works.
Now, the Saudi government, you've reported on 2030 MBS vision. There's several things I want to talk to you about it. Now, that vision is on a pause during this war. Gulf states are no longer making the money they used to make. Are some of them are requesting loans from the World Bank already,
Wow.
or and uh, they are starting to face like they're really starting to feel this pressure. The rich and Dubai has left. Whoever stayed was the leftover who cannot pay the visa or their country doesn't care enough for them to evacuate them. Um, you can see the numbers in the Gulf states. Majority of the people who were killed by those missiles were uh, people who are on the kafala mostly,
Yes.
the Pakistani or Indians.
For work visa.
And it kind of shows you how much care that we have for that. And yet, the Saudi government needs the price of oil to be $111 a barrel to fund its NEOM project because they have actual projects they need to make. UAE just pulled out of OPEC.
It just went down to $70 a barrel, didn't it?
For OPEC 77, for WTI 66, for Brent crude is about 70 something. UAE is at 66. So they're really trying. You can tell the UAE can make profit selling oil at $40 a barrel
because it's that light.
because because they don't have projects, they don't have other costs that are
I
associated with it, and their efficiency is so high. So those three things, if Saudi Arabia just was going to cover Aramco's bill, $40 can cut it. But because Saudi Arabia is using Aramco's money to fund the royal family and the Saudi government, they need the price of oil to be at $90. For funding OPEC, they need the price of oil to be at $111. So depends on what
what
you're
they're
trying
doing,
to accomplish. Yes.
what you have to put on hold because it's not going to go that high. It's not.
No, it's not. There, it's not gonna go that high, and the oil world supply is not going to slow down. The Back in 2013, you could see OPEC and Saudi Arabia putting pressure on Russia and Iran to slow the prices of oil, and their tactic was, if you raise the prices, what we will end up doing is we will undercut the market so bad that you will hurt and everyone else. I will hurt, but I'm willing to take the hurt, but I will make it hurt so bad for you that you will come to me and say, let's talk about talk about raising the prices of oil again. So I could see Saudi Arabia making a move like that in the future, but they're not at a good situation. They're in a very bad spot.
Yeah, they need
Uh,
this over. Everybody does.
how how much of the Gulf current foreign policy is pushing towards stability at the moment?
I think they all want stability as much as they can have it because that was always what their flag was about. That's why you go to the UAE at Christmas time and half of Britain is there because it was a safe place to go. You could, have a great time. The weather was good. It wasn't difficult to get there. The whole Gulf was like that. Stability was their brand. And they don't know what to do with themselves when stability is so threatened. That's why I say they all want this war to end. And it
Even
surprises.
even the most hawkish one, the UAE, now is asking for this war to end.
Yes, I
Is
know,
that
and
what
they're the
you're about to
most
say?
pro-Israeli of all of them, and they are asking for it to end.
Right. And the Israelis haven't been good friends to the UAE either. Um, it seems like every time Netanyahu makes a secret trip, it's not secret for the rest of the world. It sounds like every time there's a secret Iron Dome that we're not supposed to know about, Israel is letting the whole world that they have given. Every time the UAE is trying to do something under the table with the Israelis, some Israeli leaks it to the rest of the world. And that makes the rest of the Gulf states really pissed off at the Israelis and is
It's not
putting
a good advertisement for the Abraham Accords, sorry, it's not. And,
it's
the Saudis are pretty clear, "No, thank you, we're not doing this. There's really nothing you can do to make it attractive to us. So forget it."
okay. I must leave the Gulf states at this point. You know why? Because it doesn't matter how close we look, it's gonna look murky at this moment.
I know, that's what I always say.
It,
I don't know.
it, it's just
Talk to me
murky.
in 10 years, I'll let you know.
But here's what's not murky about the Gulf states, and this is something you've covered tremendously: human rights violations.
Oy.
The Gulf states were some of the last states in the world to criminalize human slavery. The last open slavery market in Arabia was in 1974. It has been documented in video and black and white by BBC, where they were able to go to the last open slavery market and film um, women and men who are naked and being checked as actual properties and being sold out. That changed after a lot of pressure from the United States on and Western countries. But the Gulf states' addiction into slavery hasn't ended. Let's be let's go back to look back in history to the British Indian Company, where these Arab countries in particular helped get slaves to the British Indian Company that ended up getting all the way to the United States. So if you think the Arabian Peninsula has nothing to do with the slave trade, take a look back. I have published an article on that, and look back into what that actually means. Now that they have been used to free labor, they wanted, they still needed foreign labor, whether it was highly trained or not highly trained. And it started by having church sisters from the Catholic Church being nurses. And that's when we started giving kafala. And kafala means sponsorship, where the government is sponsoring this person or a private company is sponsoring this person to come work in that country. Kafala does not have much regulations, there's not much labor protection. And it's basically your citizenship that gives you your power in that country. If you come from a first world country that gives you a lot of power, you are very privileged and you might be getting paid more than the local citizens. But if you come from a third world country like Pakistan or India or Bangladesh or Indonesia or Malaysia, then your passport is immediately confiscated. Your
Yeah.
papers are immediately confiscated. You're paid below the Saudi minimum wage, which is $100 a month. These people work 7 days a week, anytime we want them to work, whether they're maids or house drivers. Ask me, we had them in our house. We had modern slavery in my house. I speak about it openly and I'm not proud of it. Um, this is not the only thing, because when you have a triangle society, that oppression keeps going forward and it starts somewhere from the top. You knew Jamal Khashoggi personally. You have seen the human rights violations against the kafala workers. I would like to hash out some of these human violations with you if you have a second on them.
So, you know what, I know more, I have to say what I know more about, and I haven't covered Saudi in a long time. I just got a call this week from a Saudi who wanted to take down a piece that was on an NPR website from 2011 because
Wow.
there was a Saudi woman who was in danger of, getting a travel ban because it was there, and I'm thinking, "You're kidding me. They're going back to 2011?" And the answer is yes. Yes, they do. And apparently this notion, I mean, look, I know that foreign workers, I know, I would see it, but because I never lived there, I know it much, much less. I would hear people talk about it, complain about it, but I don't know it. I never wrote a story about it. I was much more interested in what was happening to Saudis. How you couldn't, and especially during that whole transition of when women could drive, and the female activists who were doing that were completely, disregarded. In fact, chased, harassed, jailed because
Hussein
first,
Al Hadloul.
this is something that we give you. You see,
Hmm.
you don't get to protest and get it from us. When we are ready, we will give it to you, which is what they did. And so
Exactly.
they had to discredit, and they're still trying to do it. Some of the
You're,
shows in
let- for the
2011.
audience, for the audience, you're talking about women protesting for their right to drive, right? So in Saudi Arabia was the last country in the world to legalize the right for women to drive. And they made a whole scene about it in the UN where he asked to clap. And that was a whole scene. for the Saudi government to allow women to drive. But Lujain Al Hadlul, woman that was married to a YouTube influencer.
He was forced to divorce her.
That's right. And she was put in prison for driving as a woman. She has a license from another Gulf state, and she has an international driver license. And the Saudi intelligence arrested her. And her arrest, she faced torture in prison. Um, horrible, horrible stuff. Uh, she got in prison. Her hair was black. She came out of prison. Her all of her hair was gray. And the only reason she left prison is because Biden, that was the first request Biden had for the Saudi government, is for them to release
But she had a travel
Lujain
ban.
al.
She couldn't go anywhere.
She still can't go anywhere. That's right. And even though the crown prince legalized the woman right to drive, she was still a political prisoner.
Yeah. Because he gave it. She didn't take it.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Uh,
I'm from there. I know that. Same
that's
thing happened for Abdurrahman, right? Abdurrahim, what was his name? The vlogger that got whipped. You remember?
Oh, yeah, I do. But, oh, man, I haven't thought about it in a long time. Yes, I know who you're talking about, but I cannot remember his name.
He's released out of prison. He's banned from leaving the country.
There's so many people, they don't say anything about it, but there are thousands of people who have travel bans. Thousands. Because that's what they do. And there's no place for you, there's no forum for you to go, "Oh, I have a travel ban." So we don't really know. But, the danger of having this post still up with a name in it from 2011 was that the woman would have a travel ban. It's
Yeah, there's
2026.
and women on some. So Crown Prince came out and said we're gonna let women be able to travel outside the country without a mahram, without a guardian, and without having to have their permission, parents' permission. But there is parental disobedience law in Saudi Arabia,
Yeah, no.
where even if the parents didn't give you doesn't have the ability to control whether you stay or go,
And
if
finally.
they reported you to the state, then you immediately become a prisoner
And it's the same
because
thing
you.
about driving. Yes, women can drive unless your father says you can't,
Yeah.
and then you
So
can't.
it's very interesting. It's
That
very
was a
interesting.
class issue. The rich Saudi women, they could drive, but the further you came down the class chain, the harder it was. Um, and that was pretty clear after, and a lot of people complained about that it looked nice and it was great for international relations, but when you looked at kind of the truth of how it worked, mm, you really didn't get to drive. And it mattered more in the lower classes because they couldn't afford a full-time driver sitting out in the driveway waiting for them to go somewhere.
And the license for women was more expensive to get than the license for a man, and they had to pay money to go to school for it because you couldn't you couldn't do the test without going to school. So yeah, there was a good. My mom, I remember my mom talking to me about it when Lujain Al Hadlul was protesting it. And she was a master's or PhD student at the time in the US. My mom was a master's or PhD student at the time in the US. She's like, what's the point? Only rich people will be doing it. Only rich women will be able to drive.
She's
The
right.
everyday woman that doesn't have a mahram or doesn't have a guardian or doesn't have a family, she wouldn't have access to the rest of the thing. So my mother's view was like, okay, even if they let women drive, like we still don't have like the basic of the basic. And even worse, if you are a poor woman that comes with no parents or comes with no husband, then you're screwed. You're genuinely screwed in Saudi Arabia. There's no one that can help you unless someone marries you off.
I was in Saudi Arabia in 1991. I covered the first Gulf War and the second, but I covered the first. And my favorite event of the first Gulf War were the women protesters in Riyadh who
Wait,
dismissed their drivers.
I was never told there was woman protesters in Riyadh. Wait, tell me about it.
So it was in 91. And, for us journalists, it was the first time that the press corps was half half. I'd gotten in earlier, but by the time 91 came around, I was like, thank God you guys showed up. And the military was the same. There were more women that you could see than there'd ever been. And this is the first time that the American military had unfurled. So they were everywhere. So Saudis saw them. And because it was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 months before the actual war. So there was plenty of interactions. And there were times where you'd see a woman, full hijab and what is the face thing called?
Niqab.
Niqab. And, they would do this to the women driving. And it happened all the time. And there was a moment when I was with an officer who let me drive the car because he wanted people to see it.
No, that's awesome.
Driving a military vehicle.
So you drove a car in Saudi Arabia.
I did. Anyway, there is a moment when there is a protest in Riyadh, and I think there was like 20, 25 of them. They were all, educated professional women, and they dismissed their drivers and they drove around. And those women were severely punished. They lost their jobs. They couldn't have a public role anymore. I mean, it was just, and you thought, why is this so important? What is it about controlling women that is so important to this government? But it was clearly, a capital offense. If they could have cut their heads off, they would have done it, but that would have been a bit much. And I met one or two of them. I always wanted to meet them, but I got to meet them after when I started going to Saudi on a regular basis, and when the protests heated up again in the 90s. And some of them came out of the woodwork to sort of join that protest, and they were the heroes of the movement because they'd survived for what had happened in 91. But you should look it up. It's really an interesting story. I'm surprised you don't
I
know
know.
about that.
No, no one told me about that. I
You
heard
started
about.
Saudi Arabia in 91, right?
I was born in '93, but I actually a little younger. But um, my dad. So I come from a very interesting family, but and that during that time, right before that time, you have to understand Saudi Arabia was a little bit liberal. Um, Before the Cold War, Saudi Arabia was a little bit liberal, especially with modernization. You have to remember King Fahad was the king that decided, the same king that under pressure ended modern slavery in Arabia, not ended old slavery in Arabia, was the same king that started building schools for women. And at that time, tribal leaders showed up and they were threatening, oh, we won't do this. He said, listen, I will build a school in every city and every town, doesn't matter how big or how small, for these ladies. You have the right to choose whether you send them to school or not. But I'm not going to prevent these women from going to school if they wanted to go to school. And back then, the ladies' schools was a little bit funded. So they had volleyball, they had sports, they were doing their own thing. uh, But that all changed after the Cold War, after the Wahhabist ideology was on steroids, where they were convincing everyone to become a mujahid and convincing everyone that their modern ideology of Islam was the only reason that the Islam was falling apart. And with the American green card, with the American green light, Saudi Arabia started pushing that ideology globally to encourage Muslims to go fight the war in Afghanistan. And that's where Jamal Khashoggi starts coming into the picture in the
Oh,
global
yes.
news.
He went to Afghanistan. He did.
Yeah, that's where Jamal Khashoggi started getting his popularity. Interviewed Osama bin Laden, was able to get access to the Cold War,
But
Jamal
he changed
Khashoggi.
his mind. He changed his mind.
He changed his mind. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not saying anything about Jamal. I'm just saying how Jamal came into the global picture. His because the reason I'm starting with these human rights violations, I'm trying to go through I'm trying to put a perspective of what kind of society we are talking about, what kind of government we're talking about to get to Jamal's story. So Jamal, his uncle was Adnan Khashoggi,
I know. The oil
which
guy.
is the oil weapons trafficker that is famous. Uh, I don't know if he's the one that helped set up the Yamama deal with the UK, but the Yamama's deal, if you don't know what it is a security agreement between Saudi Arabia and the UK that ended up becoming more like a concierge service for the Saudi royal family. Big story that we can get into later. But Adnan Khashoggi made the Khashoggi family a little bit more important under the royal family of Saudi Arabia. Jamal Khashoggi has his uncle's connections. He goes to Afghanistan. He comes back. The Saudi government is impressed by him. They hire him to become a news reporter and here and there. And then he becomes the speaker of the Saudi embassy in DC.
No, I think
When
he was in London before then, because that's when
Yes,
I met him. I meet him in London, and
I
he
was about
is
to ask you when you met him. Yes,
and I think he's the spokesman at that point for, I cannot remember his name.
Bandar,
He's hmm?
Bandar bin Sultan, or
No,
was it Prince Faisal? No, no.
he was the head of intelligence at 9/11, right before 9/11.
Faisal bin Sultan.
Nope. He's still around. He went to Princeton. Who was the CIA, or the CIA, the intelligence chief
Uh,
right before 9/11?
Prince Turki Al Faisal.
Yes.
He
Yes.
was the Saudi ambassador. He was the Saudi ambassador to the United States as well.
And in London, and that's when I met Jamal. And if you covered Saudi Arabia as a journalist, you had to know him because
Jamal was the inside guy, wasn't he?
he was the inside guy. And so it was funny after he died, all of the people who were writing about him, I realized, Jesus, we all knew him. We all knew him because you had to, because
So
that was
if
the
you
only
were
way.
a journalist and you wanted to ask any questions about the Saudi royal family or the royal government, was Jamal your guy to go to?
Except for times when he couldn't, and there would be blackouts with him where you couldn't he wouldn't answer, and I
Oh, was
never
that
knew why, but he just would disappear for a while and then he'd come back.
interesting?
So he said something, he did something that pissed them off, and he would disappear, and you just had to wait. I've had dinner with him where I was drinking wine at the table. I forget whether he was or not. And then he'd disappear, but not for that. There'd be something and it wasn't clear what it was.
It will never be clear with an insider guy like him. It's very interesting because before he died, he was involved with Amr bin Abdul Aziz. He was involved with Hizb al-Tajamma al-Watani, with the Saudi National Assembly party before they became a party, and he was connected to some of these people. But he was always a person reaching out to get that type of information. He knew almost every president and every prime minister in all of Western
He
countries.
thought like a journalist. He was just like us. He acted like a journalist. He thought like a journalist. He just had more constraints than we did. But that's why he was so interesting because when he told it to you, you knew it was the truth. I mean, he didn't ever try to give you a line of propaganda about the Saudi government. He never did. It was off the record, but it was very, very helpful when you were covering that country. And sometimes you just couldn't figure out what is going on because everybody is so opaque. And he wasn't. He was the only person in the kingdom who wasn't opaque.
What did Jamal Khashoggi represent to the Western media journalism when he was alive, and what did the journalist the journalism industry lose when we lost Jamal Khashoggi? I mean, he's been a colleague of yours. He's
I think
not
I
the
can
only.
speak.
You're not his only friend.
No, oh my God, he knew the entire Western press. He knew everybody because he was so important to all of us, because he was the insider who would explain things. I think what he wanted was a democratic Saudi Arabia. He really did. And he really thought that it could happen. That was what was so interesting about him. He was an idealist. Um, and I think that's why he was willing to talk to us. Do you remember he started a news show? I think it lasted for about a nanosecond.
Yeah,
I was around when
he
that happened.
started a TV station
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with with Prince
Um,
Al
um,
Walid bin Talal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it did last for a nanosecond. One day, I believe it lasted.
Yeah, and it was closed within the same day, and that's when he's really started getting butthurt toward the Saudi government, because this is the project of his life,
Yep.
where he was supposed to have the Al Jazeera version of Saudi Arabia, where they're like supposed to be a little bit more independent or really journalistic approach,
Nope.
investigative journalism. That did not go well with MBS, did it?
Nope. He shut it down. And I think that was the first time the mask came off for him. That was very tough for him.
Tell, did he tell you about that experience?
No, I saw it go on the air. I knew what happened to it. I saw it all the way up, and then he kind of disappeared. Then it was hard to get him.
He
Just like,
was
oh,
told to disappear.
yes. And you kind of knew that. When he disappeared, somebody told him to disappear. And then he'd pop up 6 months later, and, it was pointless to say, what happened to you? Because he wasn't going to tell you, and it was only embarrassing to ask the question because that's the world he lived in. And so I found him irreplaceable. There was never anybody else like him. Um, and I was shocked what they did to him, just completely shocked.
Jamal never wanted to be a dissident, did he?
No, he wasn't. He loved his country. He really did. He really did.
He, how did he ever tell you how he came across Omar bin Abdulaziz, or did did he just? I feel like he might have reached out himself or something from the stories I've heard, but I don't know if he that was something he shared with you.
No, the thing is, there'd be long periods where I wouldn't see him at all. Either I
Okay.
couldn't, or there'd be stretches where I wasn't covering Saudi. I wasn't there all the time. I was in and out of Saudi Arabia, just part of my coverage area. Um, it was such a funny place. I remember the day that I got there, and of course, there's the men's line and the women's line,
Hmm.
and I'm in the women's line, and I forget why this was true, but every maid from the Philippines was in line ahead of me, and none of them had their headscarves on, and I went, "Wow, that's weird." And so I took mine off too, and we walked outside, and they all kept theirs off, and I thought, did something change?" And
What
I
year
never
was that?
oh, 90s?
They were still loose back then, especially with foreigners.
Yeah, and so I never put it back on. But there was no announcement. It's just they all kinda knew that they could.
I, I think even when I was in Saudi Arabia all the way 2014, the expectation would be not that you would cover your head as a Western woman, is that you would wear the abaya
I
without
always wear
your.
the abaya. I like to wear the abaya. I could wear gym clothes under I could wear my pajamas underneath. I like the abaya.
Yeah.
I have no
So
trouble with the
that, but
abaya.
the expectation is that you put the abaya on, but whether you cover your head wasn't ever a part of the expectation, unless even some Saudi women that come from like liberal families, as they would allow their daughters to wear the abaya and leave the headscarves
I
on.
would see it in restaurants,
Ah,
up upmarket restaurants in Riyadh. that by the time they got their seat at the table, they didn't have their headscarves on.
Yeah.
That's where they test the boundaries of what was possible. But it was a funny place like that it was it was just everybody kinda knew, and you followed the customs.
Hey, what? Before I get that, I had something lasting international consequence. Jamal Khashoggi. I'm gonna go back to Jamal real quick. I feel like Jamal really became a target to the Saudi government once he started getting involved in the electronic bees project, the beehive project. Are you
That's in
familiar?
I'm not, because I thought it was the Washington Post columns that really annoyed them.
No. Well, according to my sources, yes, the articles really pissed him off, but he was going somewhere even more dangerous than the articles. You see, the Saudi government have a facility called I'tidal. Under I'tidal, there's multiple things. Most of it is about monitoring public opinion, making sure no public dissent happen in terms of social media, cracking down on these voices. And when there is, since King Abdullah was the king, Saudis went to Twitter uh with anonymous accounts to show their own protests. So when they had like when the economy was tight, they would go to social media during the Arab Spring on Twitter, and they would say الراتب ما يكفي الحاجة. The income does not meet my needs. And that was a big hashtag, and it went real public. And before Saudis hit the streets, King Abdullah saw those hashtags and immediately gave everyone a check. Now, King Abdullah was dying. King Salman came in. They established I'tidal, and the Saudi government started making so many robot accounts. The idea is to attack that protest. So if there is راتب ما يكفي الحاجة, the income is not enough, the immediate hashtag that would come against it, the Etihad versus Hilal, two sport teams, like fighting it. Now the whole focus on Twitter, the top hashtag, the top trend is only about soccer. The second one they choose, and they make a whole list of things that has nothing to do with the protest. Well, the Saudi opposition abroad was trying something about that, something to disrupt the government ability to control public opinion inside the government, inside the Saudi. So they came up with something called the beehive. The beehive was a bunch of volunteers who have nothing to do with the government, or maybe to do with the government. They're volunteers. And their job is to show up on Twitter every day. And every day there's a specific group that would share a specific hashtag. And we had a whole program. Every 30 minutes, we would share the hashtag. We would make a tweet. We would make a post, and it would be thousands of us. And it would be like literally designed to counterattack the I'tidal. So we named the common name for I'tidal is called the electronic flies, and the Saudi opposition became the beehives. And the government saw that was being prepared, and they had to go into action to stop Jamal from being involved. Jamal was assassinated right before that plan went into effect.
Wow. I didn't know that. I know that he was talking to a Canadian.
Yes, Amr bin Abdulaziz. Amr bin Abdulaziz was hacked by Pegasus because he was the main target. Once he was hacked by Pegasus, they started finding out Omar bin Abdulaziz's plans with Jamal Khashoggi to set up the beehive.
Correct. Now that you're saying this, it brings it all back because I used to take my students to Canada, and we went to the Citizens Lab at the University of Toronto, and they were the
That's
ones
how
that
they
gave
found
the
out
story.
Omar was hacked. Yes.
Exactly. And I got to have my phone checked because I was talking to Jamal, and I asked them to check, and they said no, but of course it wouldn't because they were coming from Omar Abdulaziz to Jamal, and so it wouldn't happen for a call that he made out. It was going it I I don't understand all of that, but they said no because the route wasn't the route they were looking at. They were looking at the route between Omar and Jamal. I forgot about that.
Yeah. And the scary thing about Pegasus is that it does not need a security weakness from you.
Yes, I know.
Pegasus can hack anyone's phone without you clicking a link, without you opening an email, without anything. And Saudis pay millions and millions of dollars just to hack one person, not multiple people, just one person. So imagine how scary Umar bin Abdulaziz was. Once they found out that Jamal is in direct communication and already planning the beehive, he had to be eliminated, in an opinion. The beehive went through, especially after Jamal was assassinated. Umar bin Abdulaziz felt it was his mission to create this beehive. I was a part of it. Jamal Khashoggi, I was attacked on September 6th of 2018 while I was doing voter education for the November ballot. I had really bad injury, so I was at home doing nothing, and I saw Jamal. The day I was getting my staph infection figured out after the surgery and stuff, Jamal was executed. I was in the hospital. I was watching everything. By the time I got home, I had to do something about it, and I saw the beehive and I joined.
We already
Here's
this
what.
didn't isn't that when we started talking to each other?
Yes, that's when we started talking. That's exactly when we started talking. And here's what no one has reported on from the West. The beehive got infiltrated.
Mm.
The thing that Umar did not have, he was not an expert in cybersecurity, and his team weren't experts in cybersecurity. They set up the they set up the beehive. They asked us to volunteer, not outside the country, but even people inside the country. When people inside the country started getting involved, they started giving the basic: have a VPN, don't connect your account to an email, don't use your phone number connected to the account, make sure that you're using a different IP address, don't click on links, don't tell people who you are, don't meet people online that you are working with, the basic stuff. Well, they broke these rules. They ended up making Telegram accounts. People on those Telegram accounts ended up wanting to do protests on the streets in Saudi Arabia without meeting each other. So there was this government infiltrator that was in the group. He identified himself after he was successful of arresting hundreds of us. And he's like, fuck you guys. We just arrested a whole bunch of you. Peace out. Close his account. So many of us got arrested. We went to Umar bin Abdulaziz. We went to his guy, Abdulaziz Al Hidayf. These two guys were mainly running the program, and we told them, we have people arrested. We need to do a campaign solely focused on getting them released, solely focused on getting the media attention on that arrest. We haven't heard back. We kept getting back to them until Abdulaziz Al Hidayf told me in a space on Twitter in front of a room full of 100 people, and he said, "I am busy going to school."
Ooh.
then if you are busy going to school, why are you running the beehive? So that's when the Saudi opposition in the West started falling apart because no one started trusting each other. People started having becoming gatekeepers, and if you notice, there is no like cohesive group outside. There's just a religious Muslim Brotherhood group that has a lot of Qatari support and has some support from private individuals. And we have actual reports of the Umar bin Abdul Aziz and some of his guys giving up some of their own people in exchange of money. I have people that have the evidence and it has been published. But there are certain names that they have collaborated with the Qataris, not the Saudis, the Qataris, in order to hand back a protester or something. Her name is Nofal Maadir. She was a refugee or asylum seeker, and they convinced her. The Saudi opposition was in direct communication with the Qataris, and they were like, "Don't worry, the Qataris said that you'll be fine. That your family will take care of you. That you'll be set up." She went back, disappeared, and somehow got her hands on a phone at one point, and then like spelled out the whole story, and then we never saw her again.
Jeez.
Like, so she came out and confirmed it to the rest of us, but we never heard from her again. So, like, this the Saudi opposition has done some shady shit after all of that happened and after a lot of money was introduced. And unfortunately, because no one is familiar with this, no one has reported on it.
Wow. No, well, because those kind of stories, you have to be really dedicated to get into the network and have people trust you and let you tell the story, and it's not worth anybody's while if you don't get it completely. I see why.
Yeah. You had to get a lot of facts. You had to cross reference a lot of people. There's a lot of moving pieces of the puzzle. If you reported it, you might have been called a liar or pushing facts that are not real. I
And
get
you
it.
and you wouldn't get a visa again.
Well, no, you would be reporting on the Saudi opposition. You would be getting a visa.
Yeah, true, but you better say terrible things about them, otherwise you wouldn't. Always responsibility you have to take. It's like trying to get into Iran, access is denied.
um,
But anyway,
do you think there's? Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say we've been doing this for 2 hours.
Yes, I actually was gonna cover one last thing. I don't know if you want to do another episode about that, but my audience definitely is interested in getting some basics on how they can be their own independent, like news investigators, not like professional, but they want to learn how they can, as everyday people, how they can look at the headlines, navigate through the stories, find the correct sources, or, fact check. They want to learn the basic of how they can be their own individual journalists. Do you have any tips for that?
So, here's what I say. I now do this with Substack, and I used to do it with Twitter. You set up your Substack with a list of dependable sources, and how do you know that? I don't know. You look at what other journalists have signed up for, because we kinda have a sense for it. Phillips O'Brien when I wanna know about Ukraine. Alex Finley when I wanna know about what the Russians, because she's a former CIA counterterrorism officer. So she teaches it, so she knows. Um, when I wanna know about Syria, there's a couple of people, Charles Lister, you kinda know who's doing this, and, Ibrahim, Hamidi, who is he's doing the publishing for a Saudi magazine in London now. He was one of the best Syrian journalists that there was back in the '90s. He really, really knows his stuff. And you set up your Paul Krugman for the economy. He tells me stuff I don't know, and he does it in a language I understand. And I never did when he was an editorial columnist for the New York Times. And he's just now a whole lot better. And I find that, I read Substack before I read the New York Times in the morning now, because if I set it up right, these people will all tell me stuff that I'm not going to see in the mainstream media, which I don't trust as much as I used to because it keep firing all the good journalists. Um, and so I would say start there. I would start looking at, if you want to do your own, I think that, who's the woman who has three names, who is extremely popular in the States? She's a historian, professor at BU. Um, and I want to say Helen, but it's not. Can I find it fast enough? What's interesting about the way she writes, and she does it because she's not a journalist. So she uses, good journalists to say, here's what the Wall Street Journal reported about that. Here's what the Times reported about that. And she, the way that she does her daily filings is through good reporting. She's not saying, I know this, because she doesn't. She's a history professor, but she knows how to look at patterns and make that into a coherent whole.
Is she Saudi?
No, she's American.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about someone else for a second. I was like, I don't know about Saudi Helen, but
Uh,
that's
I won't be able to find it fast enough. Anyway, you know, i- if you look at what other journalists are following, you'll see who we think the most credible sources are, and that's how I used to set up my Twitter feed. Mostly other journalists, because they tended to put it on Twitter before they filed it. So you would know it before they filed it. Um, but academics have really come to the fore in my view and in my readings. That's why I like Phillips O'Brien. He's an academic. There's another guy who is fabulous, I think, at West Point. I think his name is Guggen, and he's a history professor there. And his stuff is just terrific. He has a real sense of organization in the way that he reports. And I always learn something from him, and I always repost him because I think it's important. But
um
it depends on what you want to do. If you want to file daily, that's one thing. If you just want to read enough so you feel like you're getting news, look, I think we have a limited amount of time in Substack. I think eventually Substack will go the way of Twitter. It's just going to happen. And we're just going to have to get used to that's what happens. Popularity is the death knell. They're already talking about putting ads on, popular Substacks. They are. That just happened.
yeah.
And it's too tempting for everybody who's in this. Do you want to make money doing this, or do you do it, for and would I like to make money doing it? Of course I would. Do I take the trouble to try to make that happen? No, I don't. I don't. I just need an outlet. um and I've started to
You do give classes, don't you? Just go ahead. You do give class. You were you about to say?
No, I was just about to say I'm now, doing some freelance because I figured out how to do it, because I never had to. I had 3 long-term jobs. Um, oh, thanks, Crichton. Heather Cox Richardson. I just got a note. Heather Cox Richardson. Thank you. Um, and she's interesting in terms of format and how she does it. She's not a trained journalist, she's not, but she thinks like one. And so what she's doing is attributing. Journalists can say anything they want if you can do at the end of your sentence according to.
Mm.
I used to have these arguments with students when they were writing about Gaza, and they would put in, it's a genocide. I said, "You're 20 years old. You're not a lawyer. You don't get to do that. Sorry, that's not how journalism works. You can do it if you say, comma, according to, and then cite your source." In the beginning, there weren't so many, so you couldn't. As a journalist, you couldn't do it. But as there were, the South Africans brought their case. There were some Israeli academics who were saying that it was. Then you had some way to use the term and make it according to. I mean, that's how we work. You have to attribute it. You don't get to say these things by yourself. You're just a journalist.
You're a professor of journalism. You also you were telling me that you just came back this last weekend from a trip giving a training. Was
Yeah.
that correct?
So Cornell
So,
has a theater school. Yes, I did. I had 2-day workshop. All my students were PhDs candidates.
are there any courses or trainings that you have out there that people can sign up for who are interested in getting some basic training?
No, but I think, ask ChatGPT, ask Claude. I'm sure that there are. I've never looked into it myself, but I'd be surprised if there wasn't. But that's
Yeah.
probably the way to do it. I had no idea that they were doing this at Cornell. Somebody from Princeton asked me if I'd do it. This is a famous summer school that Cornell has every summer. And most people are teaching 6-week courses. And then they have a couple of workshops, and it's 2 days. And it was really fun to do because this was a bunch of very interesting, very smart PhD candidates who wanted to learn how to write in a different form than academic writing, which is impenetrable in my view. And journalism is a good template for lawyers. You want to write your film proposal. It's a cleaner way to write. There's a lead, there's something called a nut graph. It's about 3 paragraphs down, and it tells you what the story's about so that you can unfold it and not have to put everything in the top. It's just every journalist knows what the format is. It's very simple. And if you look at the Times and deconstruct what you're reading, you'll see it's everybody does it the same way. Saves time.
Deborah, you've been covering the. Thank you so much for coming. We've been here for 2 hours. I
I know.
I, I don't want to take your time. Uh, you've been covering the news for decades. What brings you hope every time?
My students, they're bright, they're committed. I got 7 out there. They're doing amazing work. Um, I just met a bunch of PhD. I don't have kids, so it's really interesting to interact with people who are much younger. Let's not do the math. Much younger than I am, and I meet them. I taught at Bard in 2024, and that was a real revelation. I had 3 Ukrainians, a Syrian, 2 Afghans, 2 from Macedonia, 1 from Hungary, 1 from Romania, 1 from the Netherlands, an American, and a Marxist from Wales. And I felt the same thing with that cohort as I do every year with my Princeton students. These are committed, smart young people who want to go out there and make a difference. And the ones who graduated a couple of years ago I got one at the New Yorker. Read Ben Taub's piece on Greenland. It is fabulous in the New Yorker. Fabulous. Took him a year to do it. It's just wonderfully, deeply researched and reported. He shows you that this started in the first Trump administration, not the second. And these guys have been working on it for a long time.
Well,
And so, I got a guy who's reporting on the Hill. His stuff is just terrific. So that's what makes me, as a journalist, feel like we're going to be okay.
that's awesome. Well, thank you for tuning in, everyone. If you haven't subscribed to Deborah Amos, go ahead and click on my name. You'll see a chart that drops. Please click subscribe to
I do.
Deborah
I
Amos.
do.
I
I always
saw,
see it. I always see you send it my way. Thank you very much for that.
yes, I I didn't see that you have a membership option for to become paid subscribers if they wanted to
Yes, I
become
do.
paid subscribers. Yes, if you have become paid subscriber, please become paid subscriber
Yes,
for Deborah Amos.
I never say it because I don't know why I don't, but I should. I never say it. So I've gotten quite a few
No,
more subscribers, but they aren't paying. That's how I know if they're on that page, then there is an option to pay a little bit.
no, I have one of the most affordable membership, $5 a month, $30 a year.
That's what mine is.
And for someone like Deborah Amos, I consider her heavyweight. I keep an eye on everything she published. Someone that
I know you
knows
do.
what
Very
she's
nice.
talking about. Someone that has been to the Middle East, done her work, earned her stripes, and is renownedly respected. please go ahead and support her. She deserves your please. She deserves your. If you're watching on this on YouTube, you're watching a recording. Please like, subscribe, and then come to our Substack community. We have a community that's focused on grassroots organizing, that's focused on becoming educated, and that's focused making a difference in our society. So if that's the community that you're looking for, please join us. Um, Remember, as I always say, you may not fuck with politics, but politics will always fuck with you.
Thank you for having me. It was just a delight.
Yeah, a good one.
Okay, take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.